Many people living in the afterlife have come through mediums speaking about life in other parts of the universe and the reality of visits from these entities in unidentified flying objects or unidentified aerial phenomena. In this video, you will hear 4 people now living in the afterlife speaking about life in other parts of our existence through the mediumship of Leslie Flint. Hello, I'm Dr. R. Craig Hogan, President of the Afterlife Research and Education Institute and Seek Reality Online. We've heard from many speakers now living in the afterlife saying there is much more to the universe and existence than is in our science textbooks. They say there are other planets and spheres with entire civilizations. On our planets in our own solar system, they say there are other dimensions hidden from us, with people of various forms living there. They say what we are doing to the earth is affecting them as well. In this video, you will hear the recordings of 4 speakers who spoke in Leslie Flint's sessions saying there are millions of other planets or dimensions on which there are civilizations. Some are much unlike the Earth civilization. The first is a man named John Grant who spoke through Leslie Flint's mediumship in 1969. Grant spoke about many forms of life in and around the Earth and about people living on other planets.
But in some shape or form, there is a manifestation of many forms of life in and around the Earth, reaching up and outwards to the varying other worlds upon which certain worlds, entities do live of a much higher order than man himself. These, too, from certain spheres or planets, have at varying times made contact with Earth, but they have been denied, to a certain extent, the opportunity to converse with man. I'm not suggesting here that there have not been isolated instances of souls from other planets who have not in some way or other manifested themselves mentally. There are contacts that have been made of a mental nature and, in consequence, appearances of individual souls from other planets have manifested. But, generally speaking, for a very long time, there have been manifestations around the Earth of mentalities from other planets who are concerned, very much concerned, at the motives of man and the experiments of man and the effect that certain things could have, not only in the immediate future, but at a later date, upon your world in particular, and to some extent on astral worlds around the Earth, invisible to the human eye. You see, man assumes anything that is visible is a real thing. The moon is a reality because it is visible, it is tangible, and so he'll be landing upon it. And as indeed are other worlds of which he as yet knows nothing. But these are the so-called visible worlds. But the invisible worlds, these are invariably, though not always, the more highly evolved worlds. These are the worlds of the mind and of the spirit. And these are the worlds which man has not seen and cannot see because he is of a different substance, of a different composition. But it is with the mind and the spirit that many of these things will eventually come into being and be harnessed. These forces, these powers, and man will become aware of them. This is what we hope. For a long time, certain cells and certain outer spheres have endeavored to make a contact in a subtle way, and it has had to be done in a very subtle way. But of course, no notice has been taken by those in higher places, particularly those who are scientifically so involved that they are not interested and wouldn't listen. If they did take some interest, they wouldn't accept it.
The second speaker is Sir Oliver Lodge, speaking from the afterlife through Leslie Flint. Lodge was a British physicist and author who held critical patents in radio development and independently identified electromagnetic radiation. Lodge served as the principal of the University of Birmingham from 1900 to 1920. In this communication, Lodge answers the question asked by George Woods, one of the sitters. He asks about UFOs. You will hear Woods asking Lodge whether UFOs really exist and whether they are from other planets. Lodge answers.
Oh, sir,
Yes.
could you I want to ask you something there comes through. About these flying saucers, are they true or not true? Do they come from other planets?
Of course, there are other planets who are endeavouring to make contact or are curious or interested in your world, just the same as your world, or certain scientists and peoples are interested in other planets. Of course, they do exist, and of course there's a lot of nonsense no doubt talked and a lot of things which don't apply. But of course there are entities, souls, who are trying to break through in a scientific way from other planets into your world, and who are in a position, and I would say in some senses more advanced, and are trying to make contact in their own way. But I think I can say with absolute truth that of course they are very apprehensive.
The third speaker is Sir Thomas Beecham, also speaking from the afterlife through Leslie Flint. Beecham was a renowned British conductor, responsible for the establishment of numerous British orchestras, including the Beecham Symphony Orchestra, the London Philharmonic Orchestra, and the Royal Philharmonic Orchestra. In 1967, during a Leslie Flint seance, he conveyed a message describing the existence of entities endeavoring to make contact with the Earth to offer assistance to humanity.
It's very distressing, and the way the world is now, we're very concerned about your my goodness me. And you know there are thousands of souls returning from the various worlds of the spirit. You know, you take these UFOs, as you term them, these entities that are reaching your world from different sources. You know, I wish I could explain this, but there is a reality in that. You mustn't think this about a poppycock. There are entities on different planets who have a high standard and attitude of life, a condition of life, and whose desire is to be of service to you, because there's great fear, well, not fear is best not the word, but great concern about the state of your world.
The fourth speaker is Douglas Conacher, speaking through the mediumship of Leslie Flint. Douglas and Ira Conacher were a devoted married couple with a publishing business in central London. They were determined that whoever died first would try to contact the other from the afterlife. Douglas, 20 years older than Ira, died first on June 6, 1958. A few months later, Douglas contacted Ira through the medium Leslie Flint. They carried on regular conversations over the next several years and authored 2 books together with both their names on the cover. This is the conversation Douglas, in spirit, talks about extraterrestrial contact with people on Earth.
Many people think we're coming to the end of an age now. I've heard that stated.
Well, man is always coming towards the end of an age and starting a new one. In a sense, it's true enough, but I mean, I'm not one of those people who think that the Earth world is going to come to an end.
No, not that quite, but this sort of order must change.
Well, I would say that the disorder is going to change.
Yes, that's it.
Some form of order.
Yes,
Of course, you know
that's very good.
You know what is going to happen.
No?
And I'm sure I'm right in this, that beings from other worlds or other planets, very soon, whether it'll be in your lifetime, I can't say, but it isn't, I don't feel so far distant, are going to make themselves known. In other words, they're going to come into orbit or come into being in such a form and in such a way to Earth that when man realizes the full realization and intensity of understanding of the living reality of peoples on other planets making contact with Earth, then I think the Earth is going to change, but not until.
No. Well, that's tremendously
The
interesting.
extraordinary thing is that there are these attempts being made by man to inhabit or to enter into orbit and enter into other planets. And to some extent, I think he must and eventually will succeed. That what he doesn't know is that peoples from other spheres or other planets, much more advanced than man, far, far more advanced than man, will soon be making themselves known to mankind on Earth. And this, I think, is going to be the salvation of the Earth.
Of course it would be. We do hear about flying saucers a lot now, and I believe that they're really going to
Well, because flying
investigate.
saucers are, I don't know, I don't profess to be able to explain it fully. I don't understand the scientific aspect, but flying saucers are a reality. And these beings from other planets, not so far, in some senses, removed from man. In other words, they were recognizable as human beings, but of a much higher stature, much higher nature, much higher experience, and more highly evolved and developed. These beings will eventually make themselves known. These are only, as it were, these flying saucers, that is, early attempts at contact. Well, I'm afraid that man has got some shocks coming.
Yes.
And they're going to be very interesting and illuminating.
Yes.
And I'm sure that the world is going to be brought to the realization that for centuries upon centuries, man has been living in a, I say, a fool's paradise, but certainly been living in a very narrow, limited sense, without realization of all the time other peoples and other worlds have also been living and progressing and have evolved at a greater rate of evolution. And there's going to be new methods applied scientifically which will prove this. And this is, I think, the most important thing. I mean, I don't think man realizes that, in fact, a lot of things are already being kept quiet. And I'm certain that in Russia, not so much anywhere else, but certainly in Russia, certain scientists there are already tapping these sources, and they know far more than at the moment they're allowed to say.
Yes.
But I think that the scientific evidence of life on other planets is going to be revealed, perhaps not so very long ahead, perhaps within the next 5 to 10 years there'll be evidence of it.
These speakers from the afterlife confirm what we are coming to realize today. There are other beings living on other planets and in other dimensions who are making contact with us for the benefit of all humankind. We have come to understand that we will have contact with them, and they will intervene in human history if necessary to rescue us from destroying ourselves.